We also endure a Mine Safety and Health Administration that seeks power over coal miners versus improving their safety and their health. As someone who has overseen the mining of more coal than anyone else in the history of Central Appalachia, I know that the safety and health of coal miners is my most important job. I don't need Washington politicians to tell me that, and neither do you. But I also know that Washington and state politicians have no idea how to improve miner safety. The very idea that they care more about coal miner safety than we do is as silly as global warming.
Kabul, Afghanistan now. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. As we turn now to West Virginia, where 25 coal miners at least have died. 4 remain missing after a huge explosion at a Massey Energy coal mine. It was the worst mining disaster in the United States for more than a quarter of a century. The Charleston Gazette reports mine safety experts said initial reports are that the explosion involved methane that built up inside a sealed area of the mine or that leaked through mine seals. Workers are currently drilling holes through over 1,000 feet of earth and rock to filter out dangerous gases. That means rescue efforts could be delayed until tonight to ensure rescue workers aren't exposed to dangerous gases. The Upper Big Branch mine is said to have a history of safety violations for not properly ventilating explosive methane gas. According to some reports, the mine was cited for 458 safety violations last year alone. For more, we do go to West Virginia now, where we're joined by Maria Gunno. She's an organizer with the Ohio Valley Environmental Coalition and a resident of Boone County, West Virginia, just over 2 miles from the site of Monday's mining disaster. Last year, she was awarded a Goldman Environmental Prize for activism against mountaintop removal mining. Maria, tell us what you know at this point about this mine.
Yes, thank you for having me on. And what I know about this mine is it's owned by an outlaw company known as Massey Energy. And this is Massey Energy they are a company that sees production first, safety second, and this has always been an issue here. Working, the men that work for Massey Energy are often put in dangerous situations that they should not be put into. I was standing on a cemetery that was about 2 nautical miles from this explosion yesterday, and we were working to register and mark cemeteries in the area. This same company is doing mountaintop removal coal mining near the community of Landytown, and it's impacting the cemeteries. So we were there registering and marking these cemeteries when we felt this blast. We were standing on the cemetery, and it was sort of like an earthquake, if you will. And I looked at the person that was with me and said, you know, that was a really odd blast. It was an underground blast, and it was very loud, which is uncommon. And after that, he had a scanner with him, and we heard on the scanner that there had been a terrible accident. They was calling in 40 ambulances for standby. And we, of course, rushed back out of there and to our homes to ensure that our families were located, and that's something we do here. I mean, we very much love our coal miners here, you know, and we're very proud of this tradition. But we have to ask ourselves, how long can we keep doing this? You know, I mean, we've literally mined this place to death. These mountains are honeycombed with old abandoned mines, and then the new mines, and then they're doing mountaintop removal mining now. And we're literally, on a daily basis, we're putting these men in very dangerous situations to supply our country with electricity.
Just looking at an LA Times report, violations in recent weeks at the mine include cracking and collapsing of mine walls February 21st, ventilation problems March 17th, March 23rd, and March 30th, drill dust on March 25th, inadequate air quality March 23rd. This according to U.S. records. And last year, federal inspectors have fined the company more than $382,000 for repeated serious violations involving its ventilation plan and equipment at the mine. This according to the Associated Press. What has been Massey's response to all of this, and are these violations public to the miners, to activists like you?
These violations are public, and they often don't surface or get talked about until something like this happens. And that's a part of the problem here. Massey Energy is being allowed to get by with these violations, and in some cases they're not even made to correct these problems. They're allowed to send these men back into unsafe situations. It has created an extremely unsafe environment for these miners. And you know,
there. And I want to thank you for being with us, but of course we'll cover this story tomorrow as it unfolds. At this point, at least 25 miners have died at the Massey mine in West Virginia. That does it for our show. Maria Gano, thanks for joining us with West Virginia anti-mountaintop removal activist. I'll be speaking tonight at Alsh Auditorium at the School of International Public Affairs at Columbia University at 5:30. You can check our website. Democracy Now! Is produced by Mike Berkshire, from the producer Armata Angelic, Comment, Steve Martinez, Nicole Salazar, Honey Masood, Robbie Karen. I'm Amy Goodman. Thanks for joining us.
It doesn't sound like they're doing this.
The man who was once known as West Virginia's King of Coal has been sentenced to 1 year in prison for his role in the Upper Big Branch mine fire that killed 29 people in 2010. Former Massey Energy CEO Don Blankenship was convicted of 1 count of misdemeanor conspiring to violate federal mining safety laws, and he received the strongest possible punishment available for that charge, though he did avoid conviction on more serious charges of lying to investors and regulators. So we have former Massey Energy CEO Don Blankenship. He's going to go to jail for 1 year. He's been fined $250,000. This is coming after the Big Branch mine fire, which killed 29 miners in 2010. This was the largest mining disaster in something like 4 decades in America. It's an absolute travesty. And actually, Blankenship himself paints a pretty strange picture, because he was basically a man from the area who ascended the ladder. He was of coal country, and then he managed to rise all the way up to be the CEO of this major company. And his fall from grace was really highlighted by the judge in the case, also U.S. District Judge Irene C. Berger. At the time of sentencing, she said the following. She said, "Instead of being able to tout you as a West Virginia success story, we are here as a result of your participation in a dangerous conspiracy." So what people are alleging that Massey Energy did in their conspiracy to put profits ahead of people was basically they let safety regulations kind of be ignored. So they didn't fix water sprays on a cutting machine, and then they let coal dust accumulate, enabling a spark to set off a massive coal dust explosion that just tore through 2 miles of tunnels, killing 29 men. It's pretty insane. So for his part, Massey, or rather Mr. Blankenship, he basically said, he came out in a letter to investors saying, after the disaster, he said, well, Massey Energy, we haven't been derelict in observing safety protocols. We've actually been observing them. But people found that wasn't the case, that during his tenure at the top, he basically encouraged the company to kind of, play loose with safety protocol in order to put profits first, put the miners second. And so by them doing that, that then put him at risk for, a misdemeanor. But it put the lives of so many miners, in jeopardy, and we saw a tragic result here.
Yeah, and look, I know that sometimes it can be unclear as to how a CEO of a big company, somebody high up, should or why they're being held responsible or how they played a role directly or indirectly in the deaths of 29 people in an accident like this. I understand that it's not exactly easy to figure that out, but at the same time, there needs to be specific laws in place that will always hold CEOs like this responsible. For example, they're cutting corners. It's apparent. 29 people died. There's no reason why this guy should just throw some money at these families and be basically off the hook after a year in jail, if that's what he serves. I mean, look at the BP oil spill that happened in the same year in 2010. We saw 11 people die in that explosion on the rig in the Gulf of Mexico. Now, those 11 people died. What does BP does? They throw some money at it and it's swept under the rug. They don't know. No one's being charged for those 11 people dying. So it's the same thing here. And ultimately, in the end, what got this guy in trouble is the fact that he's lying to investors, not the fact that 29 people were dead because of his company cutting corners all under him.
That's right. 2 other former Massey managers pled guilty to conspiring to violate safety laws. And also a former security chief was convicted of lying to investigators and trying to destroy documents. So 3 people have already served their prison terms in relation to this incident. It happened 6 years ago. 6 years later, the CEO finally gets kind of a slap on the wrist sentence. And you bring up that point about why is the sentence so small? Mm-hmm. Why do we only prosecute basically lying to your investors? Economic fraud is the issue here.
Ultimately,
and ultimately it's about money, and it's not about 29 dead miners in West Virginia. So the system clearly isn't set up to prosecute heads of dangerous companies when shit goes terribly wrong. And it's kind of illuminated a lot of problems in the energy industry, in coal country, as well as our larger corporate structure, and how the justice system can hold people accountable for the misdeeds of companies.
We've got a mining story for you, and it starts with good news and does not end that way. First, the good news is that 57 mines were raided by federal regulators to make sure that they were in compliance with safety rules and regulations. Finally, somebody's on the job trying to make sure that people don't die in mines. So 8 out of the 57 were Massey Energy mines. Of course, Massey Energy owned the Upper Big Branch mine, where 29 miners recently died. One of the mines that was raided was a mine in 2006 where they had safety violations. They ignored them, and then 2 people burned alive inside the mine. Now, since the mining disaster has happened, by the way, I'm sure Massey Energy's cleaned up its act, right? No. Over the last couple of weeks, they've had dozens of safety violations and fines, and they continue to fight them, and they continue not to fix them. They're unreal. And the problem is, in that area, as a great story in the Washington Independent indicates, they own almost all the mines within that stretch of river. So if you live in that area and you want to speak up and say anything against Massey Energy, you want to say, hey, look, there's a safety problem here, etc. No, you're gone. You're fired, and you can't get a job anywhere else where your family works. So now that leads to the second part of that Washington Independent story. Well, these classy guys at Massey Energy, when people wanted to take time off to visit their friends who were in the hospital who got hurt during the mine disaster, their supervisors told them, no, you cannot go, get back on the job. If you leave to go to the hospital, you're going to get fired. And then some women came to lay a wreath for those who had passed away in the mine. They told her, take your wreath, go home. You're not allowed to hang that here. Because ignore it, it'll go away. It'll be like those 29 people just didn't die. If you think that's bad, the people that work at the mine some of them wanted to take time off to attend the funerals of their friends who died in that mine. Denied. Sorry, no, you can't go. If you go to your friend's funeral, you're fired. I mean, is there evil in the world? I don't know. I think I don't believe in the concept, but I do believe some people are so grotesquely selfish that they don't give a damn about anybody else as long as they can make just a couple more dollars. And you want to call that evil, and I'll call it something else. But either way, it's sickening. It's repulsive. Blankenship makes the CEO of Massey Energy anywhere between $24 to $30 million a year. He has his private helicopter, jets, etc. He does $1 million concerts for him and his friends, Sean Hannity, etc., that are anti-union rallies. He can spend money. He doesn't mind spending money on his helicopter. He doesn't mind spending money on his rallies with his best right-wing buddies. But, hey, can somebody take off a little time from work to go to the funeral of one of their best friends who died in your mind? Hell no, get back to work. And then, in the middle of all this, conservatives will continue to argue, no, don't worry, just trust the corporations. They have your best interests in mind. Look, I'm not saying get rid of the corporations. I'm not saying get rid of capitalism, not by a long shot. After all this, I still believe in capitalism. But it has to be regulated. It's like I believe in basketball, but I know it has to have refs in it, otherwise you can't play the game. If somebody says, oh, let's pull all the refs out of basketball or football or any sport, and you're against it, they say, oh, you're anti-basketball. That doesn't make any sense. And here, these guys crush these workers, and they made sure that they didn't have unions in union shops. If you have a safety violation, you're allowed to report it. Washington Independent talked to people who used to work at the Massey mines. They said, if you wanted to keep your job, you shut up and you didn't report anything about safety violations. And you certainly didn't talk to the press. They talked to 2 or 3 people who used to work at Massey Energy. They all said the same thing. And what does Massey do on top? And this is the part that really drives me crazy. Not because of what they do, but because of the reaction of some of their workers. They say, hey, if you're a tough coal miner from West Virginia, you don't ever complain. If you're going to blow up, you don't complain. If you're going to have safety problems, you don't complain. You just take it. You get burned alive or you blow up, and Don Blankenship makes a couple extra dollars. You be tough and don't complain. And then they get some of those poor folks to buy into it. The story talks about how some people love the company so much they fly the Massey flag over their house. They mow the lawn in their Massey uniform because they're tough and Massey energy, yeah! As if they give a damn about you. If you died in a mine, they wouldn't let anybody go to your funeral either. But Don Blankenship has to have his private jets because he's really tough, right? And then again in the story, mine owners saying, oh, these government regulators, they don't know anything. They're trying to butt into our business. They should let the free market work. That's a code word for let me keep abusing my workers, ignoring all the laws, and just keep making as much money as I can while everybody else suffers. No, we need refs, we need rules, we need regulators, we need enforcers.
Six years I missed my son, my brother, my nephew. How come you never come and apologize to me personally? How come you never have to see me?
He ain't apologized to none of us.
That's all I'm asking. It took 6 years and a pity apology.
I started off was I wanted to thank the court for allowing me to speak on behalf of my brother Rex and the 28 other brave men that gave their lives providing for their families. Don Blankenship is to be sentenced today on April the 5th, 2010. Don Blankenship sentenced these men's families to a world of heartbreak, loss, and torment. For the rest of our lives, we are here to seek justice for these brave men. Justice and fairness, what does it mean? If Don Blankenship gets the maximum penalty for his crime, he will get a year in jail. That's 365 days. If you break that down, that's 12 and a half days for each man that lost his life on April the 5th, 2010.
I went, turned, take a couple steps. I told him, I said, hey, Buck. He said, hey, Daddy. I said, I love you, man. He said, I love you too, old man. He said, I'm going to mind me some coke. So I went inside and got the man trips ready to bring him out. I just want him to know that Corey was, like I said, a great, kind, young man now. Caring, loving, sharing. If he was here to meet you, and he liked you, he was his friend. I just want everybody to know that he worked hard every day. And his life was cut short for some reason. He'd give me 20 years of memories that I can make last a lifetime. I just wish but ain't nothing. I just missed it.